You need to get out of that wheelchair quickly, or you might get hurt. I could hear Tyler's happy voice behind me as I desperately tried to stop the wheelchair from speeding up. I pulled on the brakes as hard as I could with my hands. Tyler was someone who didn't care much about money, but we were supposed to be celebrating our love that day. As I struggled with the out-of-control wheelchair, I felt more angry than sad. Suddenly, something got caught, and I was thrown out of the wheelchair. There was a loud noise, and I blacked out. The next day, I woke up in a hospital room. Tyler was crying on the next bed. After a while, he noticed me and started talking, trying to sound comforting. "Are you okay, Amy?" "I'm glad," he said, with a forced smile. Then he started talking about how he got hit by a car and lost his leg. He became more emotional and showed me his amputated leg under the blanket. "Hey, you're going to help me, right? We're married, aren't we?" he said, expecting me to agree. But I refused. Tyler was shocked. "Who's going to help me then?" he asked. I decided to share my thoughts. I told him about myself, that I'm Amy Moore, a 45-year-old illustrator who used to love being active. I even competed in national swimming competitions when I was younger. But about 2 years ago, I got a disease that made my left leg weak. Now, I can't walk without a wheelchair. I explained how Tyler and I met at a group date and fell in love. We got married after dating for 3 years. We were happy until I became disabled. That's when Tyler's attitude changed. He started demanding money from my family to make our home accessible and to hire a helper. When I told him I planned to use my savings for that, he got upset, worrying that it would affect his inheritance. Tyler tried to apologize and backtrack, saying he thought we would need a lot of money from now on, but I saw through his excuses. I didn't trust Tyler's excuses. He seemed obsessed with keeping our money intact. Despite my doubts, I tried to convince myself that it was just his usual stinginess. Tyler kept bringing up inheritance and insurance. His excuses turned into suggestions like upgrading our insurance policy. I couldn't understand why he was so fixated on money. In the end, despite Tyler's protests, I decided to use my savings and bonus to make our home wheelchair accessible. I also hired a housekeeping service 3 times a week to help with chores. The woman in charge was kind, and I enjoyed chatting with her during breaks. But Tyler seemed to dislike her. He nitpicked everything she did, from folding laundry to washing dishes. His complaints annoyed me, and one day, I exploded in anger. Tyler's response shocked me. He said he'd deduct the amount we paid the housekeeper from our living expenses. That meant I'd have to cover the extra cost, as Tyler planned to keep that money for himself. I was stunned. Our living expenses were already tight, and tripling my contribution wasn't feasible. Tyler didn't seem to care. He thought since I was earning, I should foot the bill. But my income wasn't enough to cover such a huge increase in expenses. However, Tyler didn't show any signs of backing down. He agreed, but asked me to make sure to save that extra $1,000 properly. With Tyler agreeing so cheerfully, I couldn't shake off the anxiety building inside me. And unfortunately, my worries soon came true. Tyler stopped griping about the housekeeping agency, but in turn he stopped helping with any chores around the house. I tried to remind him that we still needed to pitch in with daily chores, even though we hired help. But Tyler brushed it off, saying that since we were paying for it, they should do everything. He started spending more time away from home, barely talking to me when we did cross paths, wearing a disgusted expression on his face. Thoughts of divorce crept into my mind. Then, out of the blue, Tyler suggested we go see the cherry blossoms at the botanical garden. It was a surprising invitation after 2 months of minimal interaction. His cheerful demeanor during our outing momentarily eased my troubled heart. Maybe our recent problems stemmed from not talking enough, I thought optimistically. But as we strolled, Tyler dropped a bombshell. He confessed that he was out of money and needed my insurance payout urgently. Confused and alarmed, I panicked when I realized he was pushing my wheelchair downhill without my control. Desperately, I tried to stop the speeding wheelchair, but Tyler's voice echoed merrily behind me, warning me of the danger. Despite my efforts to hit the brakes, The wheelchair hit an obstacle, throwing me off, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital room. Tyler was beside me on the next bed, crying. After noticing I was awake, he spoke to me with a pleading smile. "Amy, you're safe. I'm glad. I was hit by a car. My leg. Tyler became increasingly emotional and uncovered himself, revealing that he only had one leg. "You'll help me, right? We're husband and wife, aren't we?" "I refuse," I replied firmly. Tyler was stunned. He never expected me to refuse. Speechless, he stared at me. Why would I help someone who pushed me down a hill just to get insurance money? It was a moment of madness. I regret it. Saying sorry won't fix everything. If you were supposed to save $1,000 a month for me, what happened to that? "I am doing that," Tyler stammered. "Oh, really? Then you can pay for this hospital stay with that money." Tyler panicked because his bank account was almost empty. I knew this because I managed our finances and kept track of our bank accounts. I discovered that instead of saving money, Tyler was sending it to another woman. I hired a detective and found out Tyler had cheated on me and had a child with his affair partner. The money was going to his affair partner as child support for his kid, 4 years old. Cute age, huh? Have you been visiting her? How long have you known? "A month now," I revealed. Tyler was shocked. Then I dropped another bomb on him. "Really? I was shocked because you're paying child support for someone else's child." Tyler looked confused because he believed the child was his own. I couldn't help but laugh. "What the hell are you talking about? That kid is truly mine," Tyler said angrily. Hearing this, I burst out laughing even more. Tyler looked at me as if I was something creepy. So, I decided to reveal the truth to him. "You see, you can't even have children," I said, laughing at his bewildered expression. "Since we met, you really thought I was the reason we couldn't have kids. Well, I was considerate and didn't tell you, but your father knows." "It's a lie," Tyler said, his face drained of color. In reality, we had been trying infertility treatments for about 3 years since we got married. Tyler reluctantly took the test, and it turned out the issue was with him. But after discussing with my father-in-law, we decided not to tell Tyler. My father-in-law believed Tyler, who was emotionally fragile, wouldn't handle the news well. After explaining all this, Tyler suddenly called someone on his phone. "Hey, you had an affair, didn't you? The kid isn't mine, is it?" Tyler yelled into the phone. I realized he was talking to his affair partner. They argued back and forth, but it seemed Tyler was getting nowhere. At that moment, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard Tyler accuse her of having an affair too. Ignoring Tyler's heated conversation, I brought the discussion back to us. "Remember signing the papers when we decided to save that $1,000 you spent?" I asked. Tyler seemed dismissive, but I sighed, knowing he probably planned to backtrack anyway. I showed him a photo on my phone. "It's written here that in the event of misuse, divorce, and the entire amount spent up to the discovered month will be paid to the wife, Amy. It's properly checked, and there's a signature too, right? It's even notarized." Tyler looked frustrated, then turned to me with desperate eyes. "Please, Amy, I was just possessed. Please don't say divorce, okay? Besides, I can't pay such a large amount. Divorce is settled. I can't do it anymore. But don't worry, you can pay the spent amount in installments." Seeing him like that, with a face like he was the victim, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I sighed and called out to the figure hiding at the entrance of the hospital room. "Please come in, Dad." As his father-in-law entered, Tyler shouted, but his father-in-law's face was red with anger. "This is the end of our relationship." "What are you talking about?" Tyler asked, confused. His father-in-law came over to me, apologizing. "I'm truly sorry. I won't ask for forgiveness, and it's fine if you don't. Please file a complaint. I'm just glad Amy is safe. Thank you." I could see tears streaming down his face, and I glared at Tyler, knowing he was the reason for making my beloved father-in-law feel this way. Don't you feel anything seeing this? It's your fault. Always spending money, earning more than me, and your rich family is stingy. I don't know why I married you. So you were after the money too, I said, feeling like all our beautiful memories had been tainted. My voice was the lowest it had ever been. Tyler looked surprised, and I forced a smile. Marrying for money and then having to pay it back in the end. Huh, shut up. I'm not paying. Too bad. Payment is a done deal, my father-in-law said sternly to Tyler, who went pale and started shaking. Just then, a middle-aged doctor in a white coat entered, interrupting the tense atmosphere. He handed me a document. Is there a reason you're not receiving treatment for your leg? He asked. Confused, I looked at Tyler, who avoided my gaze. If you have surgery on your leg, you'll be able to move again. Didn't you hear that when you were diagnosed before? The doctor continued. I didn't hear, I said, looking at Tyler, who remained silent. Realizing something was wrong, I turned to the doctor. Could you please tell me the diagnosis directly? I didn't hear it at the time. The doctor explained that my illness was temporary paralysis caused by a herniated disc, and with rehabilitation, I would be able to walk again. Tears welled up in my eyes. I had trusted Tyler's lies about my condition, but now I knew the truth. There's not a shred of affection left. Tyler, what's going on? Say something. My father-in-law yelled, but Tyler just cried, overwhelmed by everything. And in that moment, I realized that if I were free from Tyler, I could truly roam the world again. I'm always left behind. If she's in a wheelchair, she will always stay home and won't have more fun than me, right? So what? Your selfish jealousy has forced me to live in a wheelchair for 2 years, knowing I could have surgery to eliminate the pain and paralysis, and you kept silent. That's the worst. At my words, Tyler hangs his head in exhaustion. I look at him with cold eyes, and both the doctor and my father-in-law seem angry at Tyler for selfishly denying me my chance for treatment. So, Amy, may I explain the surgery to you tomorrow? The doctor asks. Yes, please do, I say, instantly brightening up. The doctor smiles back warmly, giving me hope for a bright future ahead. I will instruct the nurse to separate the rooms, the doctor says. No, I don't want to be separated from Amy, Tyler loudly refuses, but the doctor ignores him and leaves the room. Amy, you're not really gonna divorce me, right? I'm an amputee, remember? I know I was wrong to keep quiet, but think about our current situation, Tyler pleads. Despite my father-in-law yelling at Tyler for his selfishness, he stands his ground. After about 10 minutes of silence, I reluctantly speak up. Then I'm gonna work and you'll handle the chores. If you ask for a service, you'll pay for it. Oh, and I'll deduct that amount from the living expenses. Tyler protests, saying he can't live like that, but I point out that's exactly what he said to me. Finally noticing, Tyler's face turns pale as he freezes in place. Realizing the gravity of his words, my father-in-law's face also turns pale. It must have been a shock to learn that his son had said such terrible things to his wife. Well, let's talk through lawyers from now on, and about the compensation too, I say, ready to move forward. Wait, Amy, Tyler calls out as a nurse comes into the room. It seems I'm moving rooms so Tyler can't easily barge in anymore. Tyler resists to the end, screaming as I leave the room, his cries fading as the door closes behind me. After being pushed out of the room by the nurse, I met my father-in-law's eyes, and we exchanged nods. That was the last time I saw Tyler. A few months later, I received divorce papers from him through a lawyer, and the divorce was successfully finalized. I heard that Tyler was quite disheartened and is now living under the strict supervision of my father-in-law. Although he managed to keep his clerical job, it seems that news of the divorce leaked, and his colleagues, who were initially concerned about his injury, now look at him coldly. Tyler brought this upon himself, but I heard him lamenting about being harassed by his colleagues. I couldn't help but bitterly smile, realizing he hasn't changed a bit. Despite the divorce, I still meet my father-in-law occasionally. Initially, he seemed apologetic, but recently he's getting back to his usual self. Upon investigation, it was revealed that Tyler's affair partner was married and had been married to the real father of her child. I sent evidence of the affair and child support transfers to her husband, which caused a huge dispute and eventually led to their divorce. Although I received a resentful letter at the lawyer's office, I ignored it. Meanwhile, I underwent surgery immediately after the divorce and spent about 6 months in the hospital for physical therapy. Thanks to my father-in-law's arrangements, I could continue working while staying in a private room. After being discharged, ongoing physical therapy and regular checkups helped me regain mobility, and now I can walk with a cane. Recently, I've been taking walks around the house. I even exchanged contact information with someone I met during these walks and promised to go for a meal. He's a very kind person who helped me when I stumbled and fell over a rock. These days, the exhilarating feeling of a new spring fills me with excitement, and I feel unstoppable.
"I don't like anything about you, Mother," said my eldest son's wife. "We want to live with our family alone, so get out." I was shocked to hear these words. It reminded me of when I had to leave my own parents' home. Now, I felt angry at the idea of being kicked out of this house too. "Fine, I'll leave," I said, gathering my things to go. This was too much. I was determined never to forgive my eldest son's wife. It was time to put my plan into action. "So, my name is Sandra Clark, and I'm 61 years old this year. I'm technically retired, but I'm still lucky enough to have some work. I don't go to the office every day anymore. Sometimes I drop by and attend meetings, but mostly I work from home. My oldest son seems to think I'm not working anymore, which isn't true. I became a widow when I was in my 40s. Right now, I live with my oldest son and his wife. Our family home has been in our family for a long time. It's a bit old and needs some fixing up, but I've always loved it. That's why leaving was hard. I've never had to worry much about money. My late husband's insurance money is still mostly untouched. I've been able to live comfortably without worrying about my future. Even though it might seem like I have an easy life, there are some things that bother me. It's mostly my oldest son's wife, Jessica. She's strong-willed and we often clash. This tension didn't just start recently. It goes back to when she first told us they were getting married. I still remember the outfit she wore when she first came to meet us. She showed up in a tracksuit that looked like something she wore back in high school. She said she wanted to be real with us, but I couldn't help but find it a bit odd. It's not exactly lying, but it felt like she was trying too hard to prove something. She's also very argumentative and smart, which can be challenging. I couldn't understand why my oldest son chose her as his partner. Later, I found out that Jessica was the one who pursued him. She's bold, I'll give her that, and she's attractive too. I think my son, who's a bit naive and sheltered, fell for her charm. Even after they decided to marry, things didn't change much. To put it nicely, she's straightforward. To be blunt, sometimes she lacks common sense in how she acts. I really wanted to object to their marriage, but I reminded myself that it's what my son wanted, so I kept my peace. And now, we're facing the consequences of that decision. After my son and Jessica got married, he insisted that we all live together in our family home. I thought Jessica might disagree, but she was actually okay with the idea. It didn't take long for me to understand why. However, once we started living together, Jessica never lifted a finger to help with household chores. She left everything for me to do, cleaning, laundry, cooking, despite being a full-time housewife herself. She had quit her job when they got married. Even though I work remotely and don't have to go to the office every day, I still have less free time than Jessica. While I'm working on my computer, Jessica would make comments belittling my work, saying I'm just goofing off. At first, I brushed it off to avoid arguments, but it bothered me more and more as it kept happening. "Jessica, since you have some free time, could you help out with the cleaning?" I asked, noticing her lounging and watching TV. She looked at me with disgust, sighed dramatically, and replied, "I don't do housework for your own good, Mother. Can't you see that? It's a shame you don't appreciate my consideration." She had this strange theory where she believed if she did the housework, it would be bad for my health. According to her, seniors need to stay active, and doing chores would make me sedentary and possibly lead to dementia. So she was actually doing me a favor by letting me handle everything. Her reasoning was so bizarre it gave me a headache. Then she said something even more shocking. I agreed to live together to keep you from slacking off, mother. She said it with a half smile, leaving me speechless. I regretted agreeing to live together more and more every day. Doing all the housework while being watched by Jessica was nothing but torture. Fed up with the situation, I decided to talk to my eldest son, but it wasn't to complain about Jessica. I decided to move to an apartment where I could live alone. The current house we're in is old and has many stairs, which became difficult for me after I hurt my back last year. I talked to my son about the challenges of living here, and then I moved to an apartment. Even though it felt like Jessica pushed me out, I don't regret leaving. The new apartment is a rental. It might be a bit big for just me, but I got a room big enough for my grandchildren to stay in the future. I had the inside designed just the way I like it, and it felt like my own little castle. But my happiness didn't last long because Jessica started coming over every day and staying until late. The new apartment is really nice, huh? Maybe too big for you, Mom? Jessica said, lounging on the couch. Why don't you come back to your old home and do the chores? It's for your health and longevity. It's unbelievable that Jessica is telling me to go back to the old house and do the chores. During the day, she's so self-centered, it's overwhelming. I've already moved out. You need to take responsibility as the wife. I handle all the chores here, and my health checkups are always fine, Jessica. You don't need to worry about me. But Jessica just turned away, ignoring my words. Ignoring anything inconvenient was her usual tactic. Yet, she kept coming to my apartment every day. Just recently, she said it's too much trouble to go back home and ended up spending the night. My parents' house and this apartment are only about a 15-minute walk apart. It was my eldest son who suggested I live closer to my parents' house because he was concerned. His concern made me a little sad to leave the old house. One day, after I had been out for work-related errands, I came back in the evening to a surprise. To my shock, Jessica had let herself into my apartment. It seemed she used the spare key I had given to my son without my knowledge. Welcome back, she said, lying on the floor in front of the TV without even bothering to get up. Jessica, that spare key is for emergencies only, not for you to come in whenever I'm not home. I felt uneasy knowing she had been in my apartment while I was away. It was the first time I firmly told her so. She seemed surprised, as I usually let things slide quickly. She gave me an annoyed look, but I stood my ground. You really are a difficult mother-in-law. I can't stand that about you. Jessica started yelling at me. I can't stand anything about you, not even this apartment. We're a family, so you should leave. With that, she tried to push me out the door. It seemed Jessica couldn't bear the idea of me living in the apartment. She was upset that they were still in the old house while I was here, calling it unfair. James is paying the rent for this place, right? It wouldn't be strange for us, his family, to live here. That's what it means to live beyond your means. Jessica seemed to think my son was covering the rent for the apartment. This explained why she kept showing up here. In her mind, the apartment should have been for her family to live in. Fine, I'll leave, I said firmly, staring her down. I agreed to move out within 3 days, which seemed to surprise her. Right in front of her, I called a moving company and arranged for them to come in 2 days. As Jessica left feeling satisfied, I watched her go, already planning my next move. True to my word, I moved out. My new place was an apartment specifically designed for seniors. I decided to test it out for 2 weeks. I handed over the keys and lease documents to Jessica, asking for a change in the contract through the real estate agent to the landlord. Luckily, I've known the landlord for a long time, so they were flexible and accommodating, which was a relief. My eldest son was furious with Jessica for kicking me out. He's even considering divorce, but Jessica doesn't seem to care. In fact, she started living alone in my apartment, saying, "Well then, let's live separately." I'm amazed at how bold she is. But in 5 days, Jessica will find out the truth. While I was working from home, my phone started ringing incessantly. It was Jessica calling. I had been expecting this, so I had a recorder ready to record the conversation. I pressed the record button and answered the call. "Excuse me, Mother, what's the deal with the rent for this apartment? Why do I have to pay it?" Jessica started ranting as soon as I picked up the phone. She sounded flustered. "Well, Jessica, you're the current leaseholder, so it's only fair that you pay. Is there a problem?" I purposely kept my tone calm and relaxed to annoy Jessica. She seemed even more agitated but didn't back down. "But didn't James used to pay the rent here? We're not even divorced yet, so shouldn't James pay?" Jessica had told my eldest son about the rent issue and he advised her to call me. The truth was, my son had never paid the rent. In fact, I had been financially supporting him. After retiring, I continued working as a consultant and advisor, earning a good salary. I was actually earning more than my son. I had been secretly helping him out because Jessica tended to spend a lot. It's just a misunderstanding, Jessica. Originally, I was the one paying the rent for that place. I never made James pay a dime. Jessica seemed shocked and caught off guard by the truth. She quickly said what she wanted to and hung up the phone. Right away, I contacted my eldest son and played him the recorded conversation. I've been putting up with it too, but I can't take it anymore. You feel the same way, don't you? I knew my son was exhausted from dealing with Jessica's debts. No matter how old he gets, as a parent, I can't help but want to help him out. Some might say I'm too soft, but I think it's just natural as a parent. My son replied quietly, I'll divorce her, I'm tired too. Then follow my lead. I told him my plan and gave him instructions. First, I asked him to take a few days of paid leave starting today. Then, I told him to quietly move out his important belongings without letting Jessica know. We didn't want her to notice any moving trucks, as she might be nearby. I had instructed him to slowly move his things out during the night, keeping it discreet. The important belongings were taken to a single-family home that I had found as our new residence. This way, the plan progressed without Jessica knowing. 3 days later, Jessica called again, sounding even more flustered than before. What? Why are you so worked up? Just like last time. I kept my tone deliberately relaxed as Jessica sounded overly anxious, almost in a state of panic. Mother, our house is up for sale. And I got a call from my parents saying that my belongings have arrived at their house. What does that mean? Jessica explained that her parents had received her belongings, and our old house was now on the market. It seemed my eldest son had followed my instructions. He had sent Jessica's things to her parents' house and put our old house up for sale, leaving it empty. The landlord told me that if I can't pay the rent, I should leave. I thought I should consult with James, and when I got home, there were chains and a padlock on the gate, and I couldn't get in. There's even a for sale sign up. Jessica was almost hysterical. It must have been quite a shock for her to come home to. I've already entered into a sales contract with a realtor. We can't access that house anymore, Jessica had began, ready to express all the pent-up frustration. Firstly, I'm no longer your mother-in-law, right? Yesterday, James should have filed for divorce. You signed it, didn't you? You and I are strangers now. Yesterday, my eldest son had filed for divorce at the city office. It turns out Jessica had signed the papers a while ago. Threatening divorce seemed to be a tactic she often used. My son used to believe that Jessica would change someday. After all, she was the person he loved enough to marry. He felt trapped into giving in to her threats of divorce, he once told me. But it seems my son has finally realized the truth. He signed the divorce papers, which had always been used as leverage, and submitted them. The divorce has been officially processed. You always used to tell James that you could divorce anytime. Are you happy now that things have turned out your way, Jessica? I could sense Jessica holding her breath on the other end of the phone. She wanted to argue back but seemed lost for words. She must have been feeling frustrated. Besides, I'm worried about you. After the divorce, how will you manage to live in that apartment without a job? Moving also costs money, and it's tough. How did you even afford it? Jessica's anger was no longer hidden. She yelled and cursed at me. She had claimed she married my son because of the inheritance he received from my late husband. However, I control all the inheritance and she can't touch a penny of it. Despite marrying to clear debts, she screamed that nothing was going well for her. Of course, I made sure my son listened to this conversation too. If it came to a divorce settlement, I planned to use the recording as evidence. I thought it was the end, so I patiently waited for Jessica to finish her tantrum. She ranted for about 15 minutes without pause. Then, in the end, she started begging me for help, crying. She confessed that she had been disowned by her family. With nowhere else to go, she pleaded for my assistance. It suddenly clicked for me. Something had felt off at the wedding, and now I understood what it was. Jessica had no place to go, no home to return to. Despite feeling a bit sorry for her, I couldn't ignore the consequences of her actions. Apologizing now won't change anything. We're strangers now. There's nothing more to discuss. Good luck with your life from here on, I said before ending the call with Jessica. I felt a sense of relief afterward. It seems Jessica caused trouble at my eldest son's workplace. He told me things escalated to the point of involving the police when he returned home. Jessica, who had been staying at the apartment without paying rent, had her keys changed by the landlord while she was out. Now, she can't even get into her own apartment. She might have tried to contact me or my son, but we had canceled our phones and got new ones with new numbers. I can only imagine the despair she felt when she realized she couldn't reach us no matter how many times she tried. We didn't give her our new address either, so she can't reach us that way. After causing a scene at my son's company, she was issued a restraining order. With no other options, it seems Jessica turned to her disowned family for help. However, when she returned home, she was met with a shocking sight. The luggage I had sent to her family's house was left out in the rain in the backyard, and she wasn't even allowed inside the house. It's likely that the unpaid rent for the apartment had been billed to her parents, adding to their anger. I heard rumors that she's currently staying in an apartment provided by an organization that supports homeless people. Without the ability to spend as she did before, she seemed stressed when I passed her on the street. I was stunned to see how much her hair had turned white and how dry her skin looked. She had changed so much. I hardly recognized Jessica at first. It made me realize just how much a change in living conditions can affect a person. I've started a new life in the house I bought with my late husband's inheritance. It's a duplex, so my son can remarry whenever he wants. For now, he joins me for dinner, but otherwise, he takes care of his own things. I've found that this distance works well for us. The money from selling my parents' home is safe for future needs. I plan to use it for my son and his future wife when they marry. And of course, I'll keep some aside for any future grandchildren. I'm thinking of creating the English garden I've always dreamed of in my new home. On days when I'm not working, I spend time in the garden, caring for the young trees and herbs. This new life, filled with hope, has become my daily routine. My sister, who took John away from me, said, "I'll be happy enough for both of us." She sent me an invitation to her wedding with John, trying to make me jealous. But I told Mom, "We'll go anyway. We'll make sure to make it special." Usually my parents are nice and hardly ever get mad, but they'd had enough of my sister's bad behavior. We went to the wedding with determined smiles, but it turned out to be a disaster, not a happy occasion. I'm Hannah Turner, 24 years old, and I draw pictures for a living. I got married recently, not even a year ago, and my relationship with my husband, John, is strong. We met through a friend and quickly started dating. He proposed to me at a restaurant with a beautiful view at night. Our wedding was full of happiness, surrounded by family and friends. One day, I noticed that my husband John forgot his phone in the living room. I picked it up and brought it to him, saying, "John, you forgot your phone." He seemed a bit nervous as he took it, thanking me quickly before rushing out the door. His sudden rush left me feeling uneasy, and that feeling marked the beginning of my suspicions. After that day, John started carrying his phone with him everywhere, even at home. I found it strange, but I couldn't imagine John would cheat on me, right? We'd been getting along fine without any major problems. So I tried to convince myself that everything was okay. However, my trust didn't last long. While I was hanging up laundry, I saw a notification on my own phone. It was an email from an unfamiliar address. "Hey, long time no see. How have you been?" It seemed like it could be from someone I knew, but I heard about scams where people pretend to be friends, so I decided to ignore it. But then another message came through. "Hey, don't ignore me. I can see you read it. Ignoring your sister? That's just like you, always so mean." Right after I closed my phone, it rang, and it was another message from the same unknown sender, calling me their sister. Indeed, I do have a sister named Sally, but she's known for causing trouble in various ways. Sally, my sister, had a history of causing trouble, especially with money. She often borrowed money from friends and then disappeared without paying them back, leaving my parents and me to deal with the fallout. Because she was their daughter, my parents always ended up paying off her debts. On top of that, Sally had a habit of making complaints over the smallest things. She'd yell and be rude, even making people kneel down to apologize to her. This made her a difficult customer to deal with. Another problem was Sally's love life. She had a thing for men who were already in relationships, whether they were friends or family. She didn't care about causing tension between people, she just pursued what she wanted. Because of her behavior, I had cut ties with Sally since she left home, so when I received a message with the word sister on my phone, I felt uneasy. I debated whether to respond, but I ultimately decided to ignore it. Whether it was really Sally or someone pretending to be her, I didn't want to get involved. However, the messages kept coming until I finally opened one to block the sender. What I saw shocked me to my core. It was a message from Sally, saying that John was now hers and that I should hurry up and divorce him. There was even a photo of John and Sally together as proof. I didn't need any more confirmation, I knew it was true. I sat down, feeling dizzy with shock and disbelief. After Sally's message, John never came back home. Instead, all I got was a set of divorce papers filled out by him. My attempts to reach John were met with silence. Losing my husband in such a sudden way left me feeling devastated, angry, and emotionally fragile. Why, John? I cried for days. Once I had calmed down a bit, I decided to reach out to Sally. What do you want? Let me speak to John. You've been ignoring me for so long, and now you contact me without even saying hello or apologizing. What's your intention? I demanded. Excuse me? You should be the one apologizing. Just send John back home for now. No way. He doesn't want to come back. He says he loves me more than he ever loved you. And why should I apologize? It's your fault for not being able to keep him. No matter what I said, Sally wouldn't listen. I was already feeling terrible mentally, too exhausted to worry or think anymore. I realized it was pointless to keep arguing. Holding on would only make things worse. You know, if you're going to be angry at someone, be angry at your own lack of charm, loser. After that conversation, I shut off my phone. I was done dealing with Sally and had lost all affection for John, who had chosen her. Before I knew it, I had signed the divorce papers, and just like that, my once happy marriage was over. My life became a mess after that. Maybe because of the emotional damage, I struggled to eat and felt more tired than usual. I looked so worn out that my coworkers started to worry. Despite trying to reassure them with a smile, it felt like my body and mind were reaching their limits. Eventually, I collapsed at work and woke up in the emergency room. My parents and a close coworker were there beside me. Hannah. Can you recognize me, Hannah? Their voices brought me back to reality. Looking around, I realized I was in hospital, remembering what had happened. Oh, I collapsed, didn't I? My dad sighed with relief. We were so worried when the hospital called. Are you working too hard? He asked. But deep down, I knew it was the stress from John and Sally. Maybe, I muttered, and my mom quickly called for a nurse to get a doctor. After a checkup, they decided to keep me in the hospital for observation. Are you eating properly? Getting enough rest? My dad bombarded me with questions, clearly worried. I assured him I was okay. My mom asked him to buy some drinks and snacks for me, and he agreed, leaving the room. Hey Hannah, something's not right, is it? Natalie said. You've seemed really tired lately, and this is so unlike you. They say women have strong intuition, and Natalie seemed to have it. I sighed and opened up to them about everything that had been happening. I ended up crying while explaining, realizing I had reached my breaking point without even realizing it. I thought I could handle it all, but it turns out I didn't understand myself as well as I thought. As I tried to laugh it off, my mom squeezed my hand tightly. I had no idea all of this was going on. Why didn't you tell us sooner? This is the first time I'm hearing about the divorce. I'm sorry to say this in front of you, Mom, but is Sally out of her mind? I can't believe it. Both of them expressed their anger towards Sally, and I could tell they were genuinely worried about me. I didn't want to cause trouble or worry anyone, so I tried to downplay the situation. I felt embarrassed, and part of me believed what Sally had said might be true. Maybe it was my fault for not being more appealing. That's nonsense. What are you talking about? It's clear that Sally and your ex are the ones in the wrong here. Natalie is right. You didn't do anything wrong. To think you were suffering all alone, I'm so sorry. Both of them looked like they were on the verge of tears. I regretted not relying on the people around me more. My mom suggested that I come back home for a while considering my mental and physical state, and after the doctor also recommended rest, Natalie took care of the paperwork at work with my medical certificate. When my dad returned with drinks and heard about me resting at home, he immediately agreed that it was a good idea. Natalie managed to explain everything to my workplace, and HR assured me, "You've got plenty of paid time off saved up, so take your time off to rest." After thanking Natalie, she reassured me that she'd be there for me, and I should lean on her whenever I needed. Over the next few days, I stayed at my parents' house. Natalie came to visit occasionally, and I could feel my mind and body gradually recovering. I realized that keeping everything bottled up inside wasn't healthy. Today, as Natalie and I were enjoying cake prepared by my mom, my phone rang, piquing my curiosity. I opened it, and my heart raced. "Hey there, how are you doing? Thought you might be wondering about us, so I decided to reach out." It was Sally, who I hadn't spoken to since the fallout. I regretted letting my guard down and checking my phone. Natalie noticed the change in my expression. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" Yeah, I'm fine," I replied, but it was clear something was off. Natalie asked if she could see my phone. I didn't want to worry her, but I had just realized that bottling things up wasn't good. So, I nodded and handed her my phone. Natalie looked puzzled as she read the message. "What's this? Is she picking a fight? This is Sally, right?" I nodded in response and Natalie closed the phone. "Just ignore it. Actually, let's block her." "No point in dealing with someone like this," she suggested, and I agreed. Opening my phone to block Sally just then, another message from Sally came in. "We've been living together smoothly since then, and guess what? I got pregnant." You might be thinking already, but nope. John and I started our relationship 6 months ago. The word pregnant made time stop for me. We had been trying to conceive during our marriage. "It would be great if we could be blessed with our baby soon," we used to say. Reading this message hurt deeply. Tears started flowing and Natalie, seeing me cry, took the phone from my hand. After reading the message, she yelled, "What? I can't believe this. I'm so mad I could explode. We should sue them." Suing was something I had considered when I first received the message, but now, I didn't have the energy or will to pursue it. "I just don't want to deal with this anymore," I muttered, and Natalie calmed down. "Sorry, I got too emotional." "You're right. It's best not to get involved." Natalie's comforting back rub felt so kind, and I cried a bit more. Then my mom came into the living room, having seen what happened. "Hey Hannah, actually, I haven't told your dad about this yet." I understood what that meant, knowing this would infuriate my dad. "But I think it's time we told him." My mom's solemn words struck me deeply. I took a moment to think. "I also believe it's time to talk about it. This is just too much," I concluded. Natalie's words convinced me too. So I decided to let my mom talk to him. My mom said she would talk about it, so I decided to leave it to her. After Natalie went home and it got dark, my dad came back from work. He said it smelled good in the house and asked what was for dinner. I welcomed him home, and he seemed happier since I returned. Mom said Dad's mood had improved, and she was glad I was back. Her words made me really happy, knowing I had a place where I felt calm. But today, Mom looked serious when she talked to Dad. She said they needed to discuss something important, and Dad understood, becoming serious too. Then Dad mentioned it was about me, and I could see kindness in his eyes, which almost made me cry. After explaining everything to Dad, he seemed calm but a bit angry. He told me not to block Sally yet, even though I didn't have to read her messages. He must have had his reasons. Mom usually followed Dad's advice in situations like this. Dad also suggested letting Natalie know about it. I understood and agreed. Both Mom and Dad reassured me that everything would be okay and that they were here for me, along with Natalie. Their kind words and smiles made me feel so relieved and happy that I ended up crying. Seeing this, both my parents laughed, and my heart felt warm. That night, I told Natalie everything, and she said, "It's wonderful you have such supportive parents, and remember, you've got me too." I gazed at the stars, feeling comforted. After talking it over more, I decided to move back home. That meant going back to my parents' place since it's close enough to commute to work from there. Natalie thought it would be better for my mental well-being to be away from a house full of painful memories. Since I was the one on the rental contract, I handled canceling it and sent John's stuff to his parents' house. On moving day, I sorted out mail forwarding at the post office and completed the move smoothly. I bid farewell to the landlord with a smile, leaving on good terms. Back at my parents' place, I settled back in and returned to work. My coworkers had been concerned, but now I could genuinely tell them I was okay with a smile. My boss reminded me not to push myself too hard, which made me appreciate my workplace even more. A few months later, I returned home. When I got there, my mom had a serious look on her face. She said we needed to talk and asked me to come to the living room after changing. I sensed something was wrong from her expression. After changing, I went to the living room where my parents sat, looking puzzled over a letter. I sat down in front of them, and they showed me the letter. It was an invitation to a wedding, but what could be the problem with it? I asked if I could see it, and my dad said yes. When I looked at it, I saw it was from Sally and John. I was shocked. What? I couldn't believe it. You filed a forwarding address because you moved, right? My dad asked. Yes, that's right. No wonder both my parents looked worried, but surprisingly, I felt calm. If this had happened before, I would have been really shocked, but now, I just felt disgusted. Are you okay? My mom asked, concerned. Dad was also watching me. Somehow, I'm better than I expected. I just feel disgusted. I wonder how far they want to go to insult me, right? Even if she's my daughter. This is too much for me to handle, I said. I'm glad Hannah isn't as shocked as we thought, but this is still unacceptable. I could see my parents were angry for my sake. I'm grateful for my parents who are standing up for me. The invitation was addressed to me. Do I have to go? I asked, feeling uncertain, and my parents looked at me with determination. Mom and I will go. We'll show them what hell looks like. It was unsettling to see my usually gentle parents so angry. But the invitation is addressed to me, I pointed out. Well, we're the parents of the bride. It would be rude not to attend, right? My dad reasoned. Exactly. It's our daughter's wedding. We're looking forward to it, Mom said with a smile, but her eyes didn't match her expression, making me nervous. Dad brushed off my concerns and kept getting ready. I hope it's okay, he said, ignoring me. I heard a car pulling up, so I went to check if they had called a taxi. But instead, I found Natalie stepping out of a familiar car. Natalie, what are you doing here? I asked in surprise as I opened the door. She looked stunning in her party dress. Good morning. Are your dad and mom ready? She asked, ignoring my question. Wait, am I attending the wedding too? I was shocked by her statement. When my parents came out, I asked them what was going on. It turned out that one of John's relatives was a friend of Natalie's. Upon hearing about the situation, she was invited to attend as his relative's girlfriend. My parents didn't object. In fact, they seemed excited about going together. As I pondered what they were up to, Natalie said, I can't just sit back after what happened to Hannah. You get it, right? Despite feeling anxious, I agreed. Then my parents and Natalie left together for the venue in one car. I thought about joining them, but Natalie seemed to sense my hesitation and said, if you want to see, I can show you through a video call. So I stayed home and trusted them. But my curiosity got the best of me, and I reached out to Natalie for a video call. When they arrived at the venue, my parents and Natalie headed to the reception. Natalie was on the guest list, thanks to John's relatives' arrangement, but my parents weren't listed since they weren't officially invited. The receptionist went to check their names, and that's when Sally showed up. Sally was surprised to see my parents and couldn't hide her confusion. Why are you here? She asked. Well, we're the parents. It's only natural for us to come, my parents replied. There seems to be a mistake. We didn't receive an invitation, they explained, which made Sally force a smile. The invitation was actually meant for Hannah. Yes, we were surprised when Hannah told us about it. We had no idea about the wedding. Since Hannah couldn't make it today due to work, we came instead. It's fine to invite Hannah, but you should have sent one to us too. It wouldn't look good without the bride's parents, right? My dad pointed out, mentioning the lack of invitation twice. Though I couldn't see my parents' expressions through Natalie's video call, I could picture the scene in my mind. Yes, I'm your daughter after all. Of course, you'd be happy. Sally seemed to genuinely believe my parents came for her sake. I thought she was delusional, I muttered to myself. Then John appeared. He turned pale at the sight of my parents. Relax, John. They came to celebrate with us. They must really love me, especially since Hannah is like that. Sally reassured John, who seemed relieved and greeted my parents with a smile. John's parents also joined in, and the atmosphere became friendly and warm. Seeing my former in-laws chatting happily, a memory of being fondly cared for by them stings a bit. I wondered if they were only nice to me because I was their son's wife, which was a bit shocking. Maybe it was indeed the right decision not to go, I murmured. And the scene shifted to the ceremony and then to the reception. At the reception, Sally and John made a happy entrance. Natalie occasionally asked me if I was okay, but surprisingly I was fine, responding, I'm okay. More than anything, I was worried about my phone's battery, but she reassured me she had a portable charger, well prepared indeed. When it was time to read the letter of gratitude to the parents, Sally started panicking because she hadn't expected her parents to come. Seeing this, my parents asked the MC for the microphone. Today, we weren't actually supposed to come, so it's understandable that Sally wasn't prepared. As a surprise from us to you, we'd like to convey a message to our daughter Sally, my dad announced. The venue erupted in applause. Sally seemed relieved by the save and smirked, clapping exaggeratedly. Dad, I'm so happy. Her exaggerated gratitude was annoying. I kept watching, feeling uneasy. Then my dad did something unbelievable with a smile. Our surprise from us to you is this, he announced, and suddenly the doors of the reception hall opened, revealing several men standing there, all looking outraged. I watched the scene unfold, wondering what would happen next. Sally turned pale at the sight of them. Our Sally is so charming that she has received affection from many men. The kind Sally has responded to all these feelings, making her a pride and joy. And today, these gentlemen wanted to give us a prize, so we brought them here, my dad initiated, leading to the men storming the stage, expressing their anger. Sally tried to escape but was confronted with accusations like, "What do you mean you're marrying someone else? How much do you think I've spent on you? Pay back the money you borrowed." Sally turned pale and was nearly in tears watching this. Natalie coolly commented, "Wow." While I was stunned. John, confronting Sally with the "what's going on?" found her too shocked and flustered to respond. Then my mom grabbed the microphone and started talking. "Guess what? We have another surprise. As my husband mentioned earlier, our daughter Sally is really popular, even with other women." When Mom said this, a bunch of women in the crowd stood up. We invited those who wanted to meet Sally. After Mom spoke, the women went over to Sally. Suddenly, someone else grabbed the microphone and shouted, "You stole my man, and now you're trying to act all happy. Give me money for cheating with my husband. You disappeared as soon as I lent you money. Pay me back." Everything got chaotic. The reception room went from noisy to really chaotic. I bet the other guests were shocked, but they seemed more disgusted than surprised. It was scary to see my parents smiling through all this madness, and I realized this was the kind of reputation my sister had. Amidst all the chaos, someone else grabbed the microphone. "Sally, it's really nice to see such a lovely person becoming our son's wife." Surprisingly, it was my ex-mother-in-law who spoke up unexpectedly. I was puzzled, wondering what she meant. She went on. "It might not be as grand as the surprise Sally's parents prepared, but we also have something special for you." John seemed shocked by his mother's words. "What do you mean, Mom? Can't you see what's happening?" But his attempt to calm things down was ignored by my ex-father-in-law, who took hold of the microphone. "First, we want to thank Sally's parents for their thoughtful surprise. I happen to own a business, and we decided to remove John from his expected position as my successor. That's our surprise for you." "What? What's going on?" Sally and John were shocked. I remembered hearing about John being prepared to take over his dad's business during their marriage, so his dad's announcement was surprising. "What are you saying, Dad? You've made your own choices, cheated by your own will, divorced by your own will, and remarried by your own will. Someone who can make such commendable decisions should start your own business rather than take over mine. Don't decide on your own. You said I was the successor." John looked panicked. "We're serious. You're already doing great on your own. Use your judgment to live your life from now on. With Sally by your side," his dad replied. Exactly, I couldn't be prouder of having a son who can make such independent decisions. I was stunned. My ex-in-laws seemed to be laughing along with my parents, but their eyes didn't match their smiles. They seemed pretty angry. Natalie found the situation amusing. "They deserve it. I can barely keep from laughing. I'm just speechless," I said, and Natalie caught me up on what had happened while I was away. My ex-in-laws came to apologize. They truly considered me and my parents as part of their family. They had teamed up with my parents to plan this surprise retaliation. Natalie had been keeping in touch with my parents and had also heard the story from John's relatives, so she knew everything. Hearing this brought tears to my eyes, realizing I had so many people supporting me. "You're not alone, Hannah. There are so many people who care about you," Natalie said, trying to hold back her own tears. "How could we stay silent when someone we care about is hurting?" Yeah, I cried, unable to speak properly, just nodding. "Thank you," I managed to say finally. I saw my parents and ex-in-laws smiling kindly at me through the screen. Meanwhile, chaos continued at the venue, with the staff trying to calm down the disastrous situation. Then, a man stood up and made his way toward the stage. He stood in front of John, who then collapsed to his knees. After saying something to John, the man returned to his seat. "Hey, what did that man say?" I couldn't quite make it out from this far away unless he used a microphone. "Maybe I should go ask him directly," Natalie suggested and headed toward the man with her phone. "Excuse me," she said as she approached, and the man turned around. I was surprised. "Uncle?" It was indeed my dad's brother, my uncle. Natalie showed him the screen, and upon seeing me, my uncle looked surprised and very happy. "Hannah, are you okay? I heard about what happened today from your dad. It must have been tough. Thanks for worrying about me, but I'm fine. By the way, what did you say to John just now?" I told him that since I run this hotel, I'll be seeking compensation for the damages. The reception hall is a mess because of the bride and groom," my uncle explained. Both Natalie and I understood upon hearing his words. That's why John looked so pale. After chatting with my uncle for a while, I felt a bit more hopeful. Trying to spot Sally through the camera was tough because of the crowd surrounding her. This wedding had turned into anything but a celebration. Looking around, I noticed many guests leaving, including some of John's colleagues I recognized, who seemed puzzled as they left. I thought to myself, well, that makes sense, feeling somewhat relieved. The wedding ended in disaster, with Sally and John looking worn out and pale by the end. "And now, the bride and groom will leave," the MC announced. But by then, most of the guests had already departed, and only our parents, former in-laws, Natalie, and a few of John's relatives were left to applaud. When my parents came back home, I went up to greet them, and to my surprise, Natalie and John's parents were with them. I was a bit shocked but bowed to my former in-laws. "I'm sorry for not keeping in touch. I regret how our marriage ended despite your kindness." I apologized, feeling guilty for not reaching out to them after the divorce. My former in-laws, with tears in their eyes, placed their hands on my shoulders. "We should be the ones apologizing," they said. But I insisted it wasn't necessary and thanked them for their care during the marriage. After that, we all sat down for tea and had a pleasant chat, expressing gratitude for the wedding events and parting on good terms. I felt like I finally had closure and felt rejuvenated. A few days later, I received a message from Sally on my phone during work. I had forgotten to block her, but when I checked, it was a barrage of complaints. "You ruined our wedding. Take responsibility. Did you tell our parents? Are you jealous? Stop blaming me for your unhappiness, loser." Sally's message flashed on my phone. I sighed and turned to Natalie at the next desk. "Can I still claim alimony for the affair? She's practically giving me all the evidence herself, right?" Fed up with it all, I decided to hire a lawyer to claim alimony. I saved all the messages and images Sally sent and replied to her. "Thanks for providing evidence of the affair. A lawyer will be contacting you, so please stop contacting me directly." Sally freaked out. "A lawyer? What are you doing? Stop it." She began deleting the messages and images she'd sent. When I told her that I had saved all the evidence, she panicked even more and started apologizing. "Sorry, it was all lies. I'll leave Jan alone now that he's not going to be the CEO, and I won't say anything mean anymore. Please don't make me pay alimony, I already have debts. That's not my problem. I don't want Jan, and do whatever you want. Actually, maybe it's good you took him. I don't need a man who cheats. And in the end, you protected me. Thanks, sis," I replied before cutting off contact. After blocking Sally, she tried reaching out from different accounts, but I blocked those too. I quickly consulted with the lawyer I was referred to, and they acted swiftly upon receiving the evidence. Soon after, I started getting messages from John. It seemed things weren't going well with Sally. He sent me creepy messages like a lovesick Romeo, which I ignored and blocked. When he tried to contact me through the house, my parents handled it. Apparently, he got scared off by them, and hasn't reached out since. Later, the lawyer informed me that John and Sally had agreed to pay the alimony. They tried to resist using Sally's usual complaint tactics, but that didn't work on a lawyer. Realizing they had no chance, they gave in. John, who was initially resistant, looked defeated and pale after learning Sally had provided plenty of evidence against him. Despite feeling bitter about being harassed by such immature individuals, I'm now just thankful for the many people who stood by me. Sally and John eventually got divorced. Sally, with no one else to turn to, contacted our house once, but my parents issued a statement of estrangement. She hung up the phone crying. John, rumored about the wedding at work, found it uncomfortable and ended up resigning. Unable to go back home, he's now getting by with part-time jobs. Meanwhile, I received a promotion at work because of my excellent performance. I also started a relationship with someone I met in my new department. Thinking ahead, Natalie also clicked with one of John's relatives, and we often share our love stories. Next month, as a celebration, my parents, Natalie, and even my former in-laws are planning a trip to the hot springs together. Despite hitting rock bottom, I feel happier than ever before.